So I wanted to thank Dr. Chapple and Monise so much for being our very special guests tonight. If you could tell, the teachers and school staff who attended were just, as always, so inspired by both of you, and I think felt really empowered leaving our discussion. So my question for Dr. Chapple and then Monise, what was your biggest takeaway from our really robust and powerful discussion tonight?
I actually really enjoyed hearing from the teachers and learning what the teachers are experiencing. I have helped, I think at last count, 29 school districts come up with reopening plans and think about when it's time to close and all of those aspects with the pandemic. I've been into different schools across the country and seen what's going on, but hearing from the teachers talk about the amount of work they do at home, the amount of work they do on the weekends, the amount of work they do at night, those are things that I wouldn't be able to see as an epidemiologist trying to do this work. So hearing directly from them has put a lot of the rest of the observations I've made in kind of into a nice package for me to really help me see that that the extent of this crisis is way more than what's talked about. It's way more than what the average person sees. It's way more than what the average person hears. And one of the things that I know coming out of all of this, coming out of the observation work that goes along with epidemiology and the things that Monise mentioned, was that once you're in schools, like you can have all the protocols you want in place, but once you're in school, actually implementing those things is a whole different ball game. Keeping kids apart from each other is impossible. I have a 2-year-old who loves to wear her mask and hug anybody she sees. So I know that these things, it's just not feasible what we are asking, what we're requiring of schools in the midst of a pandemic, and yet we're still doing it. And at the same time, we're seeing our cases be 6 to 7 times what they need to be in order for the country to be at a good place. So these are the things that are concerning and the things that we might not be able to move past because of our need to put the economy over lives, put the economy over health. Like this is just what we're doing from the start of the pandemic, even now. And unless we continue to call it out and start to really identify the problems that it causes, this is what is going to continue to happen in our country.
Thank you so much. Monise, what's your biggest takeaway from the discussion?
Real quickly, before I answer that, I want to thank Dr. Chapple for being in conversation with WITH, with us as teachers, as opposed to saying, I'm the scientist and here's what you need to do. I respect people in the medical profession. I respect scientists because it's not my lane. It's something that I can't do. So when they say, this is what we need to do to mitigate risks, I'm like, okay, I got it. This is what I'm focused on. So when we first went on lockdown, my kid and I, we stayed. I went to Ohio to get my daughter from college, like a turnaround. I went and got her. We came back the next day and we didn't go anywhere but to the store. We were seriously on lockdown. So I really appreciate her being here and listening to us because like she just said, there were things going on that she had no idea were going on with regard to what teachers are trying to do to serve our students during virtual, hybrid, whatever the amalgamation is that people are doing. So I appreciate that. My biggest takeaway is a year and some change after the school buildings closed. Teachers are still feeling like they are the only ones who are experiencing something. They are the only ones going through something. And this is kind of where Twitter is a good thing because we get to connect with people who we may never meet, but because we can connect with those people who are also teachers in other states, other countries, and we can talk about these things. It's kind of like, even though this is a traumatic experience for us, it's still reassuring to know, okay, So I wasn't being paranoid when I thought that I was being gaslit by these people, because 25 other people in different places said the exact same thing. So it's not just me. It's not just me. Other people are hearing and experiencing the same things. That's my biggest takeaway. And my thing will always be that, like I said, equity issues were in place before the school buildings closed. But until we have some people in place who are willing to make those difficult changes, I don't know how long it's going to take us to come back from this. I've put in countless hours. I don't know how much my students have actually taken from what I've done. And they're going to go on to the next grade. And I get it. But at the same time, I am used to seeing my students grow. I'm just going to be real. I know there's a lot of controversy around that, but I am used to taking a kid who hates math, who won't participate, who won't do any work. And from the time they come to me in August until about February or March, I see a huge transformation. I didn't get that this year. And I don't want to sound selfish. But I didn't get that this year. So they didn't get what they were supposed to get from me this year either. Even though I teach, they didn't get what they were supposed to get from me. And I think that we're not going to mention the name, but had we had national leadership that was more educated, that believed in science and the medicine, and had taken immediate action, I honestly believe we could have been in school by October or November. I honestly believe we could have been in school much sooner, because if we had a national mask mandate, hey, you got to wear a mask. You can't go into the store or to this place without a mask. You can't go to school without a mask. No, it's not going to stop it, but it would mitigate it a little bit, enough for us to kind of like get back to what we needed to get back to. But because we didn't have this, next year's not going to be different. The year after is not going to be different. It's going to take us at least probably about 7 years to get on the other side of this in terms of the function of what our schools is supposed to be. That's what I'm looking at, because I'm a teacher and I'm a parent. It's going to take us a good 7 years to get back to what the function of a school is meant to be. And I hate it, because I could have done so much for my students had they been with me earlier than a month and a half ago. I could have done so much more for them, but like you do every year, you pass your students on to someone else, and you hope that the person who gets them does a little bit more than what you did the year before. And I hope and pray that everybody who gets a group of students next year does more than what was done for the students the year before.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And we have to face those hard truths, right? Mm-hmm. We would have faced the inconvenient truth that we needed to have a national mask mandate. We needed to test as much as possible and listen to experts like Dr. Chapple. We wouldn't be in this position, right? And this, and Dr. Chapple, you spoke a lot about toxic individuality and the do you culture. And what it ends up doing is it hurts us collectively and individually, right? Because your individual child is now behind. Like, I know people
sitting in front of a computer all day.
In front of a computer all day, right? And I know there's a whole controversy over like behind and what do we mean by lost year? But like, you know, I think we can agree as educators and parents that yes, we've lost valuable time in the classroom of learning. That can coexist with the fact that the reality was that if we were in a classroom, we might not have had our health, and we might have had kids, and on a good day, we would have had long haul COVID survivors as a result, more of them as a result of these classrooms being open in certain areas. So those two things can exist. And I think the complexity is often lost. And I agree. I feel so lucky. I can't believe I'm saying this sentence. I feel so lucky for Twitter, because I found Dr. Chapple. I found you, Monise. I found Vicky on Twitter too. And which brings me to my second question, which is essentially, you don't realize you're being gaslit until you start talking to other people and realize they're feeling the same way. And then you feel vindicated, like, oh, wait, I wasn't wrong here by listening to the science. So my final question is, what's your advice for teachers dealing with the gaslighting? Teachers and school staff have all been experiencing gaslighting this year. That's my takeaway from the discussion too. What advice do you have for teachers continuing to experience gaslighting, even though some schools are quote unquote opening? Dr. Chapple, and then Monise.
So for me, that's been the most interesting part of Twitter, is that I chuckle all the time and say, you know, in 4 years from now, all these teachers are going to be wondering, like, why are they following this epidemiologist on Twitter? But what's happening right now is that when teachers feel like they are being gaslit, they tag me. They tag me in a discussion. They tag me in a conversation. They're like, you know, I might not know the numbers right off, but I know that Dr. Chapple does. Come into this conversation and let you know that children are getting sick, that children are being hospitalized, that since we've opened schools, the rate of children dying from COVID has increased exponentially. Like, these are things that we need to be talking about. These things that need to be said. You can say things like, you know, children are like your vaccinated grandparents and that you can all go on vacation. But just because you say it doesn't make it true. Just because it doesn't mean it's science. And so the role that I myself playing in all this is hopping into these conversations and saying, hold up, let's take a minute and let's look at what we actually know. And let's understand that there's a bunch that we don't know about children, schools, in a pandemic, because we don't ask the questions and we don't want to know. We're not putting forth the money to find out these things. One of the cool things about science and about all of this is that as soon as as soon as the virus started taking off in China, we got a sample of that virus almost immediately in the United States and started testing that to figure out what we needed to know in order to make a vaccine. That happened almost overnight. So we put all our money, all our resources into that because we wanted that to be our way out. We could have also put money, time, and resources into understanding what COVID is like in children, what COVID is like in pregnant people, on and on. We could have done that if that's what we cared about, if that's the population that we wanted to protect. We didn't do that. So part of what I'm also learning from this experience of teachers being gaslit, parents being gaslit, is that no matter what we say in this country, we don't value children. No matter what we say in this country, do we really value our elderly? I even have a problem with the structure in which we gave out the vaccine. Like, we put certain professions above the others. We've said that these professions are the ones that we value. These are the people who need to get the vaccine first. Is that equity? You know, like, there's so much that happened throughout this pandemic that's really showing us who we are. And we really need to believe that we are who we're seeing we are. So.
Yep.
Monise?
Well, I would say first for teachers is to find your community, even if it's one other person. Find your outlet. So whether it's you going home each day and taking your hot shower and grabbing a book, or getting on Twitter, which I do, eating some ice cream, which I do, binging Hulu, Netflix, which I do, because I no longer work when I'm at home. Get a therapist. This is traumatic. The time put into trying to figure out what I can do to help other people's kids. But then when I say, hey, I'm drowning over here, and I get told, do the best you can. But I still have this tremendous amount of paperwork, this tremendous amount of documentation that I have to do. And you expect to see rigor when you observe my classroom during a pandemic. Okay. So find your community, find your outlet, go to therapy, and cut yourself some slack. Because teachers, despite the flack we get from the public overall, we really are very hard on ourselves. We are self included, we are extremely hard on ourselves. If I wasn't hard on myself, I would never have spent my weekends doing lesson plans and finding resources and trying to make it engaging and coming up with all these activities to do. I would have just taught straight from a book and just said, hey, I'm teaching, right? Cut ourselves some slack. We have to. And I agree with what Dr. Chapple just said about we don't value kids and we don't value the elderly and the way the vaccines were distributed. I'm guilty of being a vaccine tourist. I went to Alabama to get one because my governor did not put teachers on the list. And so I knew I was going back into the building with people who I don't know what they do when they're outside of the building, because some of them have already had COVID last year. So if you're doing stuff where you're in a group when you shouldn't be in a group, when the CDC said, don't be in a group with people who don't live with you, but you still got COVID, I can't trust you. So I have to look out for Monise because I have a kid at home. So teachers on Twitter were DMing me saying, hey, you can get your vaccine in Alabama. I'm like, are you serious? They're like, yeah. I said, are you sure they're not going to turn us away? They said, nope. I had people telling me you can go and get it. So I signed up. I said, okay, worst case scenario, I go. They say I can't get it because I live in Georgia. It was only an hour and 45-minute drive. I had no issues. I got my first vaccine and then on a Sunday. And then I think that Wednesday, the governor announced that teachers were going to be on the list. I was like, it's too late now. I already got my first vaccine in Alabama and I'm going to go back to Alabama to get my second vaccine. So when people were just now getting their first, I was getting ready to get my second. So I'm already, quote unquote, fully vaccinated ahead of all my colleagues because they waited for our governor to put teachers on the list. Because I didn't know what I was going back into. Like I said, you don't know what people do in their personal time. Going to parties, going to church, going to bars, clubs, concerts. I don't know. But I had to make sure that I had some level of protection in order to be comfortable going back into the building. So we don't value kids. We don't value the elderly. We don't value poor people. We don't value people whose first language is not English. We don't value people with disabilities. I know this because that's my fight every day, trying to fight for these kids who fall into those categories. Mm-hmm. So I just want teachers to really try to take care of themselves from this point going forward, because you have no idea what August and September is going to look like. We don't even know what the numbers are going to look like come the end of the summer.
Thank you for sharing that. And for me, my advice as to how to deal with the gaslighting, definitely similar to what you're saying, Monise, but I had to really tap into my vulnerability as a teacher because when I first started teaching, I mean, I'm old school, not too old school, but 2 decades of teaching. When we first started teaching, we were told, don't smile before Christmas or the holidays, right? And I smiled the first day. That's my personality. Mm-hmm. And I always kind of, from the beginning, I was hard on myself because of that. I thought, oh, I'm not following the rules of how to be tough and strict and not smile. But I actually have had to be even more vulnerable moving forward, especially this year, 19 years in. And that's been hard for me. So even for me, it's been hard. And I'm pretty authentic and real with the kids. I mean, I have my boundaries as their teacher, but I like to show them a little bit more of who I am than your typical teacher. And I think we've moved towards that now as a society with teachers and educators. But when I first started, it was a little weird that I was like, I like that song. And they were like, you're telling us what music you like? That's so weird. But it's how I connected with them because I do it. What keeps me energized is being in the classroom with kids. And this year we don't have that. Whether you're teaching hybrid, remote, or in a classroom, it's not the same. And for me, it's just been really tapping into my vulnerability in a way that I never had before with teachers I don't know on Twitter, with epidemiologists I don't know on Twitter, with teachers on these Zooms, and honestly, with my students. We were taught to always say, act like we knew what we were doing at all times and knew the answer. And I'm really good at acting like I know the answer, even with my friends. And they're like, how did you know that? I'm like, I actually don't even know if that's true. Say it with your teacher voice, I don't know. It sounds about right. And this is the first year where when you're on a screen, you have to be real with them. So I'll say to them, yeah, I know we did the classwork on a Google Doc last week, and then we did it on a Google form the week before. We're back to the Google form. I think that works better. What do you think? And, you know, when I first started teaching, you were not supposed to show your cards like that. And I'm literally like, I don't know, tell me if this is working. Or I'll say, you know, is this video fun? Like, are you learning from it? And I used to not want to ask that because like the video with the content they needed to learn, but I need to have some kind of I have to have more openness with them now because there's a screen disconnecting us. I don't see their eyes. And so, and you know what? It's more exhausting than ever because there's that energy you get from kids when you're in the room with them. Even if they're bored, it's the bored energy. You know to change course. Or when their eyes light up, when you show them something really cool and you look at a document and a kid figures something out that you didn't think they could figure out. And you don't have that. So it's extra energy on our end. And I agree, Monise. We need to be so much less hard on ourselves because I'm so mad at myself for being tired. I'm like, why are you tired? You're not even standing all day. And it's more exhausting because we all are in this for the people, whether you're an epidemiologist working in public health or you're an educator like you, Monise, and so Dr. Chapple, you're an educator too. We're doing it for other humans. And in a society that seems like it's valuing property over people, even when we're seeing why that's not working in our society, it gets harder. It gets harder and harder.
It does. It really does.